got 25 minutes. We got to go.
Hey.
Hey, you. What is going on? Oh, man, look at my
Happy
background.
Wednesday, everybody. Happy Wednesday. Welcome to Say That channel, where we are unapologetic about talking about the ugly come up of entrepreneurship. My name is Janelle Villiers. That over there is Winston
There
Broad.
she goes. There she goes. She got it.
I'm an author and entrepreneur. He is also an entrepreneur and an author. And we love talking about the ugly come up of entrepreneurship. You might be wondering, what is that, Janelle? Well, you'll all hear those stories about how people start off with nothing and then they have this massive success and they're all the way up here. And you're like, what happened in the middle? What happened during that ugly come up? That is what we're here to talk about, ladies and gentlemen. Really excited to bring you along with us on that journey within this community of entrepreneurs. Say That Nation. Hello, what's up? What's up? How are you doing? Okay. So, yep, that's right. Find us on Instagram. What we normally do is we have a topic of the day, and then we've got 25 minutes to answer that topic. A lot of times we bring on guests to also answer the topic, and it's amazing. But when we don't have guests, what we love to do is we love to talk to or listen to other thought leaders, other content creators to hear what they've got to say about different topics. And today is one of those days.
Absolutely. So to that point, I also want to add, last week, I know we were having issues streaming here live. But the guest that we did have on, which was an amazing episode, it was actually Janelle's cousin. All right. No. Oh, my bad.
You're not related.
Oh, okay. My bad. Either way, an amazing guest. Oh, your cousin is a real estate agent.
Yeah.
An amazing guest. And that episode was posted. We will make sure that we add it to the end of this one, in addition to the other video that we're going to check out, just for anyone who missed last week's episode. I know you guys like watching it live. It was put up. Just wanted to throw that in there, Jay. But let's jump into today's topic.
Does the new Biden labor law affect entrepreneurs? What? I'm just shocked by the question. I'm like, what new Biden labor law? What's going on here?
Absolutely. Now, interesting point. This was actually something got passed back in March, but we were obviously doing our March Madness series with network marketing, and so we didn't have an opportunity to discuss this topic. But I'm actually happy somebody submitted this and sent us some content to check out, so we could all learn about this.
Me too. I'm really excited. So, without any further ado, let's get into what Yahoo Finance has to say about this. Really excited to hear what they've got to say, because this could technically impact us all. All right, ready?
All right.
Here we go.
Change is coming for millions of gig workers who could qualify under a new Biden administration rule, making it harder for companies to classify workers as independent contractors instead of employees. Now, that goes into effect in March. Now, in tandem, the Labor Department also rescinding a Trump-era rule today that had broadened the classification of independent contractors. The revamped rule means easier access to benefits, protections, overtime, higher wages, and more. So how will companies that rely on independent contractors and gig workers, like your Uber, Lyft, DoorDash, and others, offset these added costs? Let's bring in Michael Burnick, Dwayne Morris LLP employment attorney and former California Labor Department director, to discuss more. Welcome back to the show here. So for people who are seeing these announcements crossing today, what should they be aware of as a gig worker as to how they should be navigating this?
Well, as you say, Rochelle, it is a process that'll take some time. First, it doesn't eliminate the gig economy. It merely changes the rules on how do you classify between gig economy workers and employees. And we've had this in California. We went through a similar process in California in 2019 with the passage of AB 5 that made it more difficult in our state to classify workers as independent contractors. So we have some experience, and what we find out is, one, that it's a company by company process. So it's not as if a whole category of independent contractors or app workers are changed. It's company by company. It takes time. And of course, the gig economy, an estimated 57 million workers, is so diverse. We often think of it in terms of the app-based workers, but they're a very small part of the independent contractors and this gig economy. So it'll take some time to play out, but you're right, it is a major change, and we've seen that in California.
And so obviously there was some pushback from some employers, even when the draft rule was first announced back in 2022, saying, look, we can't afford these added costs for these extra benefits. How did that play out in California?
Well, we have seen a diversity of responses. In some cases, workers have been moved from independent contractors or gig economy workers into employee status. In other cases, though, Rochelle, workers who are independent contractors found their positions eliminated. Employers or companies did say, we just can't afford if we have to move you into employee status. So it's had that diversity within and among employers. Some have been able to move people on. As I say, others have decided they just can't absorb the additional costs. So it really has split among sectors, among occupations.
And as you mentioned, there, not just gig workers who have a high amount of independent contractors. You think construction, you think healthcare. If you're an investor and you're seeing some of these new rules come into place, then what should you be paying attention to? And what do you think perhaps is a good place to start looking at some of these companies beyond your Ubers and your DoorDashes?
Well, as you say, the Ubers and DoorDashes, the whole app-based, which we often think of in terms of the gig economy, is really less than 10%, of the gig economy workers. They're in construction, they're in trucking, they're in hairdressing and other fields. So it's diversity. I think the rule, as you point out, came out initially in October of 2022. Then there was a market response in terms of particularly Uber, Lyft, some of the app-based ones who saw their shares go down. On the other hand, I think now the market has recognize that this isn't going to have at least an immediate dramatic impact. And I would think that at least going forward in the next months, we won't see any dramatic change.
And Michael, in terms of the pros, as a worker, obviously your added benefits, higher wages, etc. But what about on the downside? Because one of the things that people liked about independent contracting was perhaps some of the flexibility. Are there any downsides that we should be aware of? Well,
a lot of upsides, but it's very interesting, Rochelle. We had hearings here in California throughout 2019 on the change in classification, which the so-called ABC test, which bears similarity to the Biden rules. And there are a lot of independent contractors, particularly in trucking, but a wide range of construction and other fields, who came out and said, we want to be independent contractors. A lot of the so-called creatives came out and said, we want to be independent contractors. Now, that may be false consciousness or some mistake on their part, but I don't think so. And it shows that I think within the independent contractor rule, the idea that all people want to move into employee status. Some certainly do. And for many, it's a positive thing. But there's a strong, significant core of current independent contractors who prefer to be that.
Indeed, because you see a lot of these people having sort of juggling multiple contracts at once. And I guess for them, it wouldn't be to their benefit necessarily. Appreciate you breaking the data down. Michael Bernick, Duane Morris, LLP employment attorney and former California Labor Department director. Thank you so much.
Wow.
Huh.
Okay.
So
I have thoughts.
I have thoughts, but my thoughts are like, I feel like I have more questions now than like necessarily a lot of answers. The focus seemed to be so much on the app-based gig, and he said that makes up less than 10% of contract workers. That like, I feel like, no, so then why didn't we talk about the other people? They mentioned truck drivers, construction, hair, creatives. This is my world. I like live in the world of the creatives. Literally, that's what we do here on this show. Like, what does that mean? We don't what? So like YouTube is gonna make us an employee now? Like what?
But that's a great point, because on some level, and the aspect of it that I'm interested to hear more about for myself is where like taxes and those things come into place, because that's one of the reasons why many people don't want to be considered an employee. When you're I can speak to just even from being in real estate and being considered an independent contractor, it means I got paid, and whatever I earned, I got. There were no benefits to the point he mentioned. You weren't getting any benefits. There were no medicals. And for many people who are just employees, you don't know what you're. There are obviously people who would want those things, and then there are people who would just rather have their money. They would just like to have whatever they're earning or charging. They want to be able to keep a large portion of that, minus, maybe registration fees and things like that that they have to do to have certifications or, other designations.
Yeah.
But what this does now is it forces you out of that. To the point he also made at the end, it does lock you down because many people have rules where they can't take on multiple employees, but as a subcontractor, I can have multiple subcontracts going on at multiple times. So this limits many people's earning power depending on the industries that you work in.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's a ton of things. The big thing that jumped out for me is with this law is designed, in my opinion, to create a way to tax people who were not being taxed before. Because the people who he was talking about, hairdressers and all those people, they get paid, many of them, in cash, and they don't report what they earn. But now when a company is having to make you an employee, that company is not going to put themselves at risk to hide a few dollars that you weren't reporting on your taxes.
Yeah. So interesting. This is why I love getting together and like talking about these things, because I didn't even think about the tax side of it, but you're 100% right. I was also thinking about the time side of it. Like, if I become an employee, does that lock me into you knowing what I'm doing 9 to 5, right? Like, or
well, you can still do part-time. Like, again, so what he mentioned, some of these people, like an Uber driver, let's give an example. That person doesn't have a set number of hours they have to do, as far as I understand. And please, if someone out there is an Uber, I don't believe they have any requirements, because again, they aren't held to being part-time or full-time. It's just a free flowing, from what I understand, kind of thing. But now, again, if they're now being offered benefits, that's why a company like Uber is like, I don't want to pay for that person's medical.
Right.
This person isn't an employee of mine. Right. I have employees that take care of my technical stuff at Uber.
Right.
But the people who work in their workforce, they don't want the financial responsibility. Imagine what that would do to that company's margin to have to give medical to every person that joins them at Uber. A job where you can quit and start whenever you want.
Or like Airbnb.
Exactly, which is why they were showing the stocks from those companies, and they were talking about the fact that they took a dip because earnings. I mean, let's keep it real. For anyone who looks at the stock market, these things are based on what a company's earning is, and if a company is having to pay employees more, we've had multiple conversations on this show, guys, about what it means for a company to. I think we literally had the question of, is it better to cut margins by letting go of your employees or finding some innovative ways? And this is what this law essentially forces many of these companies into doing. And I'm talking about, it does hit to the question that we were posed today. Does this affect entrepreneurs? I absolutely believe it does.
Yeah.
Because many of you have people that you probably have on as freelance workers because you don't need them full-time on your staff. You just want somebody who's a subcontractor to come in, do a project for you and move on. And for many people, they do that, periodically. They have them come in, and they don't want that person as an employee because they don't want to have to pay that person or have to pay taxes on this person. And I'm thinking of the medical aspect, but I'm sure there are other things that come in with this as well.
Oh yeah, 100%. My gosh.
And obviously the taxes help the government out because now you're having to report these people's income.
Right. It's so interesting because it's described as something to help people because like you should be getting minimum wage and you should be getting insurance. Not that I'm against that. I'm not
against. You know what? Again, that's what I've said. But for someone, my first job or my first career was in real estate. Again, I didn't have what many people. When I moved into a job where that was something people really wanted, and there was like a requirement of how many sessions, or you had to do a certain amount of productivity to earn this at a company I worked. I was shocked as to how many people. To me, that seemed like something you were holding over people. This idea of we will take care of you. We will pay the cost to have you I mean, it's a very interesting, again, nothing against that system. It was just a very foreign concept for me, coming from one type of work structure and, you know, compensation structure, to move into one where things like your taxes were being taken away from you, but yet at the end of the year you may still owe. It's a very fascinating it was just a very fascinating thing. So for anybody, again, as an entrepreneur, where many of you, you don't even have, you're designing your own tax bill as you go, you know, your write-offs. Janelle just stepped into that as an author in that space, and as a speaker now, you're going to have to find different deductions, and you know what I mean. It's very different than what happens at your job now.
Oh, 100%. Just so for some context, because I actually used to teach a class called healthcare, essentially, like the fundamentals of healthcare in the United States. And I was like, this is a joke, right? Because it was always changing. But I can tell you, in terms of history, where the idea of benefits came from was back in World War II. You had most of the workforce leave to go fight in a war. And so businesses had to attract the most qualified people to come work at their companies. And the way in which they used to attract those people is they say, hey, we can't really give you a big salary, again, because of the war, and like, you know, everybody
finances.
Yeah, exactly. But we will pay as a benefit to work here. We will pay for any of your medical expenses. And that is how benefits and health insurance became a thing.
That's wild.
Isn't that interesting? I know. I always think
it really is.
It was, it was, everything is born out of a necessity, right? So that was
it really, and again, you know, I mean, obviously for me, it's just the idea that I know other countries have a system that provides for their people without the need for that. So again, it's just a very fascinating thing, because as America,
that's also historical too. America was just about to do
institute universal,
everybody gets healthcare, and then World War I happened, and it went out the window.
Money went, But well, let's not get too off topic. But yeah, so I do believe this obviously affects us. And to that though, I will say this: there are constantly going to be laws, I think, that are passed that, you know, in the short term may seem to provide, you know, some type of, I'll call it resistance. But I ultimately think, as we recognize, because things have to continue changing and evolving, this will ultimately work out to help many people. Because the thing I always thought was, if you remember back when we talked about how so many people moved out of the traditional workforce into being entrepreneurs, there had to be some type of not get back, but there at some point you must have realized that was a lot of money that left one side of the if you ever know Robert Kiyosaki's, that was a lot of money that left one side of the quadrant and was attempting to move over to the other side of the quadrant at a pace that's not, the market's not necessarily set up for. And the government runs on some part, you just understand, on taxes. And if that money is not coming from companies, then they're going to have to find some other ways to do it, whether it's in cities, they're charging you more for speeding. They'll find ways to get money. Food prices obviously go up through inflation. Obviously, things like that come into play. So they were going to come for this money through taxes somehow, in some way.
That's an interesting way to see it. Again, and like, I'm sure there's a ton of people who are arguing. Like, I think about, there was an interview that I recently saw with a gig worker, is an app-based gig worker, who, I think it was DoorDash or Uber Eats, one of them, who was on his bike, got injured, and then couldn't pay because he doesn't get health insurance from his job. So he had to go to the hospital to fix like a broken leg, and like did like a patch up job as best they could with what he could afford. But in order to pay the hospital bill, he has to keep working. So my dude is riding a bike with a broken leg. And like,
no. Yeah.
It's like this horrible situation with catch-22. So I think there are some people who are hoping to like help
find the middle ground. Yeah,
like
that's my point. Exactly. Yeah. They have. That's what I'm saying. In order for this to happen, we must move through. This is the resistance part.
Yeah.
Those companies have to. They have to realize what they're offering people, which is the opportunity, like you said, to do what this young man can do. Work. Gina and I saw a young guy. This kid had to be in high school, like riding his bike, delivering food for us just yesterday. And it is giving it. But think about what you just brought up. If he hurts himself, he is not an employee of that company, so there is no medical. How does he provide for himself in that case? So there has to be some way that they now take on some of that, and obviously it'll dip into what they can pay, because that's where that money comes from. Obviously, people who earn paychecks now, that your paycheck gets cut up and they take portions of it to pay other things, so they won't be able to pay them, and they'll find them. The prices of the charges will go up on the search. It'll find its way through. This is how the market does it. What it needs to do.
Yeah. Well, I can't wait to see how this goes. Keep the comments coming. Let us know if you've been personally impacted by this law, if you've been doing some contract work and this is what you do and you have a certain set of clients and you provide a certain service. Now all of a sudden you're being sucked into being an employee for a company now, or if it's having no effects. That's just as much good information as the other. So we would love to.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
They did say it was company by company. So let us know, guys.
This has been amazing.
It definitely has. All right. So again, guys, make sure you go check out the episodes that we're going to post right here. Make sure my hand's in the frame so you guys can check both those episodes out. And we'll post the video that we just got done looking at so you guys can see it. But until we see you next week, as always, remember, you deserve the good life. Say that. We'll see you guys.